Live brunch. We are live. Welcome to another episode of
Live Brunch.
Live brunch.
Live
Brunch. Welcome to another episode of Live Brunch with Joel Virgo and Christine Liddiard. We're kind of on the back foot because Joel was just rebuking me, speaking the truth to me in love, and then we realized, oh right, we're going live, and so the intro video is on. Joel, do you want to do a quick 30-second summary of your talk on truthfulness?
The guts of it is that Jesus is full of grace and truth, and so his body, the church, will be as well. So what we see in Jesus is going to gradually become more and more what we're like if we belong to him, and that's what we aim for. That's what we want to become. So we learn to speak the truth like he would, but we learn to love people like he would, and doing those two together is the key.
Brilliant. I've been reading, as you recommended to some of us at the start of the year, get into the Bible, get into theology, get into systematic theology, and I've been reading Calvin's Institutes. And at the start of
You finished them yet?
No, I haven't. I'm really close to finishing the first chapter.
Good for you. That's good.
But
You're on course for the year.
I am on course for the year. At one of his first chapter really talks about the knowledge of God.
Yeah.
And the knowledge of God isn't just cold, cerebral knowledge of, or rather an acknowledgement of who God is, but it's knowledge that warms the heart, and it's knowledge of God that leads to worship. And I think just understanding the whole grace and truth, and Jesus is described as one who came in grace and love, is that when we communicate the truth with grace and the truth in love, it does warm our hearts towards who God is. It does draw us back into worship. It does draw us back to him. And that's really helped me in my perspective on communicating truth, because often we can communicate the truth and say, right, I want to correct the wrong. I want to bring you to a place of rightfulness.
Yeah.
But also then acknowledging that, no, I want to lead you to a place of not just rightfulness and truthfulness, but to a place of worship.
Yes.
And I think that's really helped me in how you communicate, and the attitude of communicating truth to, I don't know, I just sort of chuck that in.
That's so good.
Add to your preach as I like doing
It's a good
every
place
time you
to
preach.
start. Love it. Really good.
Just to kick us off with some questions. One of the questions that's come in is, often we hear the mantra of don't have negative people in your life. To what extent is that good advice? I mean, is too much negativity in the guise of truth, that probably isn't going to be helpful to us. So what would you say to that?
I think that the premise of the comment, where it comes from, where the root of it is the interesting thing. Don't have too many negative people. Don't cut the negative people out of your life. Is fairly typical advice for an individualistic culture, which is what we are swimming in all the time, whether we realize it or not. That's the fish bowl, the fish tank that we swim in, is a world where it's assumed that we are primarily individuals whose main goal is self-fulfillment. And if that were the truth, if that were the final truth, if that were the sort of the truth that wins, I would think it would be excellent advice. Cut the negative people out of your life. Amen. If the world is basically about me and my fulfillment, me and my sense of fulfillment, my sense of my ego being properly entitled and fulfilled, then that's fine. I agree with it completely. Now, the point is that Jesus comes into the world with a very different idea of what wins, what's the winning truth, what is the most important thing. And his vision for human existence is not individual self-fulfillment. His vision for us is a community that have been brought alive together in his death and resurrection by the Holy Spirit to build one another up. And so we find our truest fulfillment not in seeking it, but we find it in loving one another and being together is actually better for us. And so sure, there are people whose propensity and personality is such that they are more negative than others are at the moment. In their life, they might be a bit of a voice of negativity. And there may be some skills that we need to learn how to not allow that voice to hurt us or harm us in any way. But it doesn't give us permission to sort of just cut and run and to make our individual career path or our sort of personal development plan the final authority. I haven't got that permission. If I belong to Jesus, I belong to his people. Mm-hmm. I really do. I can't change that. I can't tell you the number of times in my life I've wished I could, because there are negative people in the church, and you kind of think, oh man, sooner be rid of you. And then you realise, wait a minute, maybe I'm one of them. What makes me think that I'm Mr. Positive?
I know I've been meaning to say that to you for a while. But
well, yeah, let's do this. Let's do this now. And so I have to come to realise, no, it just doesn't work like that. I'm going to have to think of this a little differently. So there may be something in just kind of, if there is someone who in your life where there's a degree of control they've got of you because you're actually frightened of them, you've allowed fear, or those kinds of things are real, and we need help, and we need to make good decisions, and sometimes there's a certain cutting out of people, certainly. We can come back to that. And Jesus clearly occupied his time with some people more than with others. There's nothing wrong with that. And we need to be honest and clear about that, but for the right reason, not for the selfish reason.
Yeah, anything you would like to add to that, Christine?
Well, I think it's a matter of balance as well, isn't it? And that, yes, we are called to speak the truth in love to one another, but that's not to be our whole mission in life. And we're going to have people speaking lots of different things to us. So I think if there's an issue of balance where one particular person is always negative towards us, then we might need to think about that relationship and how we are going to put boundaries, helpful boundaries around ourselves, because I think that this kind of thing, this speaking truth in love, has to be done in a relationship of trust and reciprocity. So if there's just somebody who's just always negative towards you, I don't think that's necessarily what Joel's been talking about.
I just want to touch on the thing that he said about the whole relationship of trust, and this is, I guess, a question to you as our church pastor is, you could be, when you're on the receiving end of maybe some correction or some criticism or I guess negative feedback, it's quite, you find yourself almost emotionally so upset that you're like, I want to leave the church and I want to get away from church, and I want to get away from these negative people, because how dare they speak this into my life. And I've been in that place where an elder or one of my pastors has come to me and brought in rebuke, and my first response has been, I'm leaving, I'm done, I don't want to, and by God's mercy I haven't. What would you say to people who've probably heard something critical or negative and are feeling like, no, I don't want to be a part of this thing anymore?
There's so many things. I think you may need to just, I certainly wouldn't make an immediate decision like that anyway, because your first response to somebody's correction is always going to be tinged with discomfort, and it's even pretty likely that there'll be a certain kind of temptation towards resentment and anger, and that's kind of unavoidable. I don't think there's a way around that. I think if it always feels, when somebody confronts us, every single time that ever happens, that we feel actually all we've received is a nice big warm hug. Some people will say that. So even when they tell you off, it feels like they're hugging you, and that's I love that. It's not right. What a gift if you've got people like that in the church. But sorry, we're not all going to be like that. We're not going to be that good at it. If we wait till everybody is that tender before anyone's allowed to, we'll never get there. So And it's even the very following chapter in Proverbs, in chapter 28, is a verse, whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor than he who flatters with his tongue. And the key word is afterward, because there's a delay, right? Whenever I've tried to correct somebody, I've had to accept that the gratification doesn't come during the correction.
Yeah.
If it does, then I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
If I get pleasure out of correcting people, then I'm probably a little bit dangerous. It should be that it makes me feel, I don't want to do this. And it should be that the person that receives it should feel a little bit of a sense of, oh, wow, I need to think about this. That's never going to be pleasant. You know, in Hebrews 12, it's that passage about, you know, no discipline seems pleasant at the time. So there's a time factor. And I just would say to people, don't make dumb decisions. Don't. If you feel like you've been told off, you feel like it's been a bit, maybe you even feel like it's been a little bit too hard. That could happen. No question. You know, again, it says, in Hebrews, it says, you know, our fathers disciplined us as they saw fit. So what does it mean? It means they get it wrong. There's not a perfect way to do it. There's ways, and sometimes it's both are right, but they're different. Some dads will do it differently than others, you know, and different. Some confronters will do it differently. We don't want to get into such a textbook thing that there's a kind of perfectionism that creeps in, and so we just got to allow for that, and that means time and reflection. And maybe you come back to it after a season. You say, okay, I think that what that person said was going to be a mixture of things that I didn't quite like for the right reasons, some things I didn't like because they were true. And it takes time. So that would be my biggest immediate answer.
Yeah.
Do not rush into a really rash decision.
Brilliant.
And that would be too typical, too common, even for Christians, sadly. Yeah.
In Romans, it talks about how man has no excuse because God has made himself known to him. But we then find that if we start off with a knowledge of who God is and then gradually drift away from our knowledge of who God is, and ultimately get to a point where we're surrounded by lots of people who would say that I don't acknowledge that God exists. Is the discipline and the correction is what protects us from drifting away from who God is, which is why it's so important in church. And even though hearing the truth in love is painful in the moment, the consequences of not hearing the truth in love could be significant drift away from God. And I found that personally is when I have those questions about is being in church the right place to be, the flip side is, man, I don't want that sort of lifestyle where I don't want to be, where I'm not in church and I'm drifting away from who God is. And so I guess I'm trying to say is that there's the weight of discipling people in love is massive because we don't want to see people drift away from church. We don't want to see them let hurt and let resentment get in the way of their walk with God, which I think is significant, isn't it?
I think we really need to be sure about our motivation when we're speaking to people and feel that we need to talk to them, and certainly would want to pray about something before speaking to someone, and just thinking about our own motives. Am I really wanting this person's growth? Is this why I'm saying this?
That's superb.
Because I think sometimes we can see something that irks us or we're not so keen on, and maybe that's personal preference because somebody just, annoys us. Well, then we really have to question, is this the right thing to say? Whereas if I say this to this person, it might mean they'll really be able to move on in this area, then I think that actually is a better way to... So pray about it, think about your own motivation before sharing with someone.
Let's do some practical questions. So for people who may be looking at...
I thought you were going to say, let's do some...
I know, I'm quite
Let's do a workshop right now.
A demonstration of how we could bring the truth in love. That is not a bad shout. But I feel like in this moment we might go to a dangerous place. What would be some good ways to bring the truth in love? I love what you said, pray about it, make sure your motives are in the right place. Are there any other things that you would say, hey, if this is how you want to get better at doing this, I'd recommend you did this?
I think being able to, I would probably want to linger on Christine's point in terms of what's the motive behind it. If I get this point right, that the goal is this. Let's use this Ephesians 4 passage that kind of.
How do you open these verses so quickly?
Because I have a sticker in there.
Okay.
I cheat.
Okay.
Because it was in my. I was going to preach from it, but I ran out of time. So so it's in Ephesians 4. It says. Speaking the truth in love, we're to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. That's the vision that Paul's got, a body that's building itself up, that's building itself. So it's like Christine's saying that the motive behind this is so much bigger than me being able to get something off my chest. Mm. That is the thing that will drive a lot of honesty. And a lot of people hear a sermon on speaking the truth. Frankly, it's not the sermon they need to hear because they can't wait to do it. They can't wait. Finally, I get to, is that what you're, let's game on, let's do this. I've been wanting to tell this person, I'm going to stick it to her for ages or to whoever. And it's really the heart that's completely. You're irrelevant to the whole point if that's what you're thinking. That sermon is not for you. The whole vision here is this glorious body that's growing stronger and healthy. And if you hurt, I hurt. If you get damaged, I get damaged. So what's the point in me just rebuking you to make myself feel better? I might feel better, but I've made myself worse because I've actually damaged my body. So it's like if this hand feels better because it chops off the left hand's fingers. It's like, if we don't get this vision, then we've got no chance. So we start there, then we're able to start down this. And it goes against some of the things. So there's a lot of people in the church that are great at speaking the truth. A lot of websites that are very keen on, testifying to the truth and protecting the truth and discerning the truth. They're hateful. A lot of them, the atmosphere. Like you said at the start of the session about if the motive is worship, like Calvin's putting it out there, the knowledge of God is intertwined, irreducibly mixed up with worship. And it's beautiful. That first section of the Institutes is absolutely, it sings off the page. That's exactly right. It's what the knowledge of God is all about, worship. If it's not, then it's not the real knowledge of God. There's a lot of people that think they know God because they know so much doctrine. But their hearts have been cold for decades. It's dangerous. It's deadly dangerous. And it's so there's a tendency for people to speak the truth, to correct this brother, or, oh no, you got your dog. It's like, oh, be careful. But there's another way, that's the secular version of it, which is the worshipping of the authentic above every other virtue. So I get to be completely obnoxious with other people in my church because, well, at least I'm being myself, at least I'm being honest, because our culture substantially promotes that virtue of authentic. Being true to self is stellar. Being measured and thinking and doing like Christine said and praying about it and thinking what's that's not sexy. But just saying it like it is, if you can't deal with it, it's your problem, girlfriend. It's like that's not the vision that Paul's got here. So I think learning to start thinking, my goal in this is to build you.
Brilliant.
That will answer so many questions for us.
It does fly in the face of culture at the moment, where cancel culture, that whole thing where you point out people's shortcomings or failures, maybe recently, maybe from 10 years tweets ago, and then the immediate response is not to bring correction, even if the person acknowledges that they've made a mistake and they've got it wrong. But let's get rid of them. Cancel them. We want nothing to do with this person anymore. We don't hear anything that they say, which does seem quite opposite to what speaking the truth and building people up is. And even Peter and Jesus at the end of John, that whole reconciliation moment where Jesus was calling him out on on Peter's love for him, but it does end with Jesus saying, now go feed my lambs.
Yes,
and he
yes.
takes him away to the quiet place, and then John kind of follows him
Yeah.
to see what's going on. And that's such a beautiful example of speaking the truth in love.
It's a restored.
Yeah.
So it's people that tell you the truth about you will rob you sometimes of your sense of hope. Because you've hoped in the thing that you hoped in yourself, and then they correct you, and you thought, oh, what's left? And to be able to do it in a way that makes people at the end of it feel, at the end of the process, not the end of the conversation sometimes, because sometimes it's a few conversations, sometimes it's a few days, maybe months. That's painful. But in the end, the goal is restoration. The goal is better than before, like with Peter. God's plans for us are always better than our plans. Yeah.
Sometimes it is. So I'm so sorry. Go on.
I just want to say a few practical things.
Yeah.
I think that we have to realise that words are very powerful and that they can really hurt people. So we need to think about our words and how we're saying what we're saying. Think about tone, so it doesn't come across like a school teacher pointing the finger, but it's more like the motherly wisdom. I think that's important. Think about standing with the person in it and offering, we're not going to have this conversation at the end of the meeting, oh, by the way, I'm just going now, but by the way, you're like this. We're not in timing's important. Having the right time, giving the person time to actually take this on board and actually maybe say, I would really love to help you with this. I'd really love to pray with you about this. And please, come back to me. If you feel that this isn't right or you want to talk about it some more, please come back to me.
Good.
I think you have to create that framework of relationship around what's happening and make it a safe place. And I mean safe in terms of coming back to you and not being afraid of you. Because we do get things wrong, don't we? And we have to admit that when we do that too.
I think a good leadership thing I came across was commend publicly, correct privately.
Yeah.
And so you're extravagant, you're public when you commend somebody for doing something, but when you want to be slightly critical of what they're doing, do it quietly. Don't do it in front of a group of people or on a Zoom chat with all the faces looking in at you. Choosing your medium for bringing correction is important.
Yes.
Don't just send an email, don't just send a text because it's
I
easier.
think face-to-face is really important.
Absolutely.
Because you can so often misinterpret, say, a text or something like that.
I think we have run out of time, so I think just to bring this to a close, I really enjoyed your X Factor analogy. When you cringe, when you hear Simon Cowell bringing correction, saying, you're not who you think you are, you don't sing the way you think you are. But what I find really weird is, more often than not, they've got a big circle of friends behind them backstage, and sometimes the parents as well, and they're like, no, she's an amazing singer, I can't be like, I'm not a judge, and I know that she's not a singer. How have you endorsed your choice to get publicly humiliated on national television? And so I think speaking the truth in love is so important as a friend. If you just gone up to that person and said, hey, maybe singing is not your thing, maybe working in the circuses, because that's, but I think but I think on the more serious side of that is if we don't speak the truth to people in love, one day they will stand before a judge and he will speak the truth to them. And I think when we get to that point, who knows? He knows what could happen. So I think it's so important to speak the truth in love. Hey, thank you so much
Can I have the last word? The penultimate word. I will give back to you. But a good example of this, I finished my sermon and I get a text from my wife saying, you didn't say anything positive about Simon Brading when you announced him being an elder. And I just realised,
Thank you, Katie.
all I did was say something ridiculous and said that we'll talk to you more about when it's happening. So it's like, that's a good example. I mean, my wife's allowed to text me. She's my wife. There's something about, relationships where it's like, don't text me right now if you want to correct me about something. Like Christine said, think of the right thing. But certainly, if you're someone's wife or husband, then there's ways and means. But the main point I wanted to say was just I'm so excited about Simon. I don't know if he's in the room, but
he is.
Just
texting you.
Just delighted about this whole thing. And the guy is just one of the greatest men of God I've had the privilege to know.
Absolutely.
He's just a wonderful man. So thrilled that he's in our church, let alone going to be helping to lead it more and more. It's wonderful for us, wonderful for the city.
Keep
Bless
going,
him.
keep going. I
Bless
think
Hannah,
you're doing
his
really well.
wife.
Keep
Great
going.
family.
We're recording all of this.
Yeah. I've got myself out of jail, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I know it's very, very exciting. I'm sure we'll send out details about that soon. Next week, we've got Stephen Dawson speaking to us. Whoop, whoop. Now that we've announced our live brunch, he can't back out. Hey! And we'll have Stephen Dawson on live brunch next week. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely weekend. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.